Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining in. And I'm thrilled once again to have my friend Annmarie Cantrell. Today's topic is going to be how to prepare for winter, what herbs, spices, foods to have on hand. It looks like there's going to be some food shortages. So which are the most nutrient dense? What are the nourishing foods we have that will help boost our immune system and keep us healthy? So thank you, Annmarie. Gesundheit.
In my nose. Okay, good morning.
So tell us, a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in food. And I mean, besides eating it, everybody likes to eat food, but how did you get interested in using food as nourishment and boosting the immune system?
Well, I think unfortunately, like many of us who are in this world right now, I came to it through a health crisis. So I had always eaten what I thought was good food, fresh food. I grew up, my mom cooks everything from scratch. And in my 20s, my mid 20s, I had a health crisis that was very much food related. So my body started reacting very severely to certain foods that I was eating. And nobody could tell me what was wrong. And of course, nobody brought up the whole food issue and diet and how it is affecting my endocrine system and, my psychological system, right? I was having anxiety and depression and all of these things. So I found an integrative physician who helped guide me through this and put me on an elimination diet where I basically had to cut out all of the things that I was eating, like corn and sugar and wheat and soy and dairy. That's pretty much what I lived on, but I thought that I was doing well. So on this journey, I thought, great, I don't want to be on medications because all the medical establishment had to offer me were really psychiatric meds because they said it was stress and it's, just I'm too stressed out. Here, take a little something to calm me down, which was very insulting. And I started this journey and I thought, no, I can do this. And I learned, and that was 25 years ago, and I'm still on this journey. And I know so much more now than I did then. So through my learning, I really just wanted to dig deeper and deeper, which led me to a culinary nutrition program, which led me to cooking for people, and really just teaching people about food as medicine. And I feel like we're in this huge health crisis today because we've been so disconnected. We've become so disconnected from where our food comes from, who grows it, how it's grown, what we're doing to the land, and we focus not so much on the food in this country, but on supplements and nutraceuticals. And we think that, if I take this supplement, I'm good. Well, no, you're not. We really have to go back to the core and go back to our food. So that's the work that I do.
It's really a problem because, all the major health problems, every single one of them could be corrected through diet, for 95% of the people. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but most of the people could correct their health issues just by simply eating cleaner and organic and, staying away from the junk food. But we live in a world where it's just so easy to pop that supplement or that pill, which is just treating a symptom. Now, some people need supplements, right? They have some, parasites or whatever, and they need to clean them out. So we're not poo-pooing all supplements. It's the idea of replacing eating healthy with a supplement. So I just want to be clear about that there's definitely therapeutic applications. But at the same time that you're doing that, if your gut isn't healthy, then you're probably not going to absorb those supplements anyway.
Right.
So it's so important to do that. So last week at the Weston A. Price Foundation meeting locally here in Pennsylvania, you did this incredible presentation on, as I mentioned in the beginning, like what foods we should have, what spices, what herbs to keep us healthy, what's good to have on hand in the case of a food shortage. And I could not take notes fast enough. So selfishly, I asked you to come on and do this podcast, but also I figured there's probably a few other people that would like this information too. So I appreciate your taking time away from your busy day to share your wealth of knowledge.
My pleasure, because I can talk about this stuff till I'm blue in the face. I love it. I think you know that. So yeah, I'm happy to. I have a desk full of stuff to show you guys here, but I think so. Where I'm coming from, just as a little bit of background, and I'll just mention the foundation a little bit and give a little background. The Weston A. Price Foundation is a nonprofit educational nutrition research foundation, an international foundation based in Washington, D.C., that espouses the work of Dr. Weston A. Price, who was a dentist in Ohio in the 1930s, who discovered that people's physical health, and he was looking as a dentist basically at their teeth structure, what their teeth looked like, if they had cavities, if their teeth were straight, their bone structure, their jaws, could they fit all their teeth in their mouth? When he started seeing children come into his practice with cavities and not enough room in their mouth for all their teeth to come in, he really thought that, I think this is based on nutrition. It's based on what they're eating. And in the 1930s, really, what did you have? Some white sugar, condensed milk, white flour, right? Not the whole list of everything that we have in our diets today. But his work was so powerful. So he and his wife traveled the globe, and they went to about 14 or 15 indigenous cultures and actually studied them, because he said, I want to know what these people are eating. And what he would do is he would go, into an area, kind of line people up and do little dental exams. And so he would check their teeth. And these people were not using pressed toothpaste. They weren't using fluoride. They weren't flossing, right? And they had really great teeth, no cavities, perfect bone structure. And what he found was those people were eating what they had been eating ancestrally for all of these years. Foods very local to them. There were certain characteristics about it. People who were living closer to the ports where Western civilization was bringing in the white flour, the white sugar, the condensed milk, the very next generation, one generation, started having issues with their teeth. Those issues equated with other physical issues, emotional symptoms, spiritual symptoms, right? The whole gamut, right? Looking at people holistically. So he wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, which is what the foundation is really based upon, really bringing back all of this information about these, like what we call wise traditions that our ancestors had. Now, because everybody ate such varied diets, he couldn't pinpoint one thing, like this is the best diet for health, right? No, absolutely not, because your, Alaskan Inuits were eating, 80% fat. And then you had people in the Southeast Asian islands that were eating, more fruits and things like that. So what he developed were these characteristics that were common across all of these different cultures. And they kind of fly in the face of what the American Medical Association is telling us to eat, right? So some of these characteristics, just for example, is every culture contained salt. They all ate salt. So we understand how important salt is for the body. Without salt, we don't get our minerals, right? But it's what kind of salt are we using, right? So I'll start there. So what I have right here, and I keep a lot of salt on hand, because it makes your food taste delicious. And B, like I said, it helps the adrenals. It mineralizes the adrenals. And when we talk about salt, we're talking about certain qualities of salt. Not talking about the iodized, bleached, denatured salt that you get in the supermarket, but instead a really rich, natural salt, like a Celtic sea salt, which is this right here. And I don't know if you can really see on the screen, but it's not a white salt. It's a very gray salt. So the more color a salt has, the more mineral content a salt has. So my three basic salts that I really love are this Celtic sea salt. And then there's a salt called Redmond's Real Salt, which is mined in Utah. And then there's Himalayan pink salt that people use a lot as well. But those are the nutrient-rich salts. And I'll tell you something, that when I went through my health crisis, I was so mineral deficient that I actually lost my cycle for 4 years. And the only way people knew how to get it back was to put me on the pill. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. That's how I got here in the first place. I need something else. I went and I saw a doctor in Lancaster, Dr. Busco, who works very much with the foundation and works on food as healing. And he told me that I was so mineral deficient, my adrenals were so depleted, and told me to put a teaspoon of salt in a quart of water, and just drink that throughout the day. I had my period within 7 days and I haven't lost it since.
Wow, that's incredible.
Just, yeah, the power of the minerals. So don't be afraid of the salt. And we have, all of these lobbyists trying to get rid of salt, right? A really good sea salt does not affect our blood pressure because it has all of the same minerals that our blood needs. Particularly the Celtic sea salt has been studied and analyzed to have the same mineral makeup as our blood.
Wow.
So it's something when I'm feeling really depleted, I'll take a pinch of salt. Now, ancient cultures use salt as a way to preserve. It's a big preservative, right? So we want salt. We use it to make our lacto-fermented vegetables. We use it to salt meats, use it to brine, right? So it really has a lot of uses. So, I don't know what's happening with the supply chain right now, but for me, I like having these things on hand. So I always have a bunch of big bags of salt, and it's easy enough to order them and buy, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 pounds. Doesn't go bad. Share
And you will use it eventually. So even if there isn't a salt shortage, it's still good to have on hand.
Exactly. So that's salt. And then another thing that Dr. Price found was that every culture had, 3 to 5 times more fat in their diet than we do, right? And so when we talk about fat, it's these very traditional fats, primarily animal fats. So all of our vegetable oils are these very newfangled fats that actually cause a lot of inflammation in the body. They're very pro-inflammatory. They're very high in omega-6 fatty acids, which are pro-inflammatory. And they cause a lot of oxidation in the body because of the way they're processed. But again,
which is causing free radicals, and that's the precursor to disease.
Exactly. So, all of these lobbyists, because it's so cheap to prepare, and it's so easy to grow canola and sunflower and safflower and soy and corn, and process these seeds into oils, we're really doing ourselves a disservice. And saturated fats have become so villainized, over the last 70 years or so. And for me, it's like, that's what we need to go back to. We have to have this understanding of physiology in our bodies, that 50% of our cell membranes are made up of saturated fat. So if we want to keep our cells strong and healthy and replicating in a way that they should be replicating as healthy cells, we want to make sure we're getting enough fat in our diet. And interestingly, it's the saturated fat. People are like, oh, but my liver. I know we all have like congested livers these days, right? Because of all of the toxins. But actually these fats help protect the liver from an excess of all of these toxins.
Yeah. So yesterday I had a patient come to me about, she just went to the doctor and, oh, look at your cholesterol. And I've actually talk about this all the time about the statin drugs. And I try to explain that when they do your blood cholesterol, it has nothing to do with the food that you're eating. It has to do with what your liver is producing. And I talked to her about how the cell membrane has cholesterol in it. And if you deplete the body of the cholesterol, you're probably going to age faster. And we definitely see it in the brain, people that are having cognitive problems. And it says it right on the If you look at the inserts that you can find online for any statin drug, the number one problem or side effect is muscle pain. Number two is memory and confusion. So if you deprive the body of that cholesterol, that good fat, you're going to have health consequences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, we see it. It's so ubiquitous now, right? I mean, look at Alzheimer's, you know, how it's coming up. I mean, other factors as well, the heavy metals and all of that, but how many people are on statin drugs? And cholesterol is the precursor for all of our hormones.
And the other thing that we were talking about is, the doctors are they're not treating people who have heart disease with the statin drugs. They're treating people as a quote preventative. And, as I was telling my patient yesterday, I said, you wouldn't give chemo to someone as a preventative, right? So why are we giving statin drugs as a preventative? And especially the research shows that you have a higher incidence of developing cancer. So it's like crazy. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
No, I mean, it's important for people to understand. And there's a really good book out there called The Cholesterol Myths that talk exactly about all of this. So fat isn't something to be feared, quite the opposite. And my favorite fat is butter, basically, so a really good organic butter that you can buy in the store that's pasteurized. But I love to get a raw butter. So, you can make it yourself, by getting raw milk and skimming the cream and making butter yourself. But the raw butter, particularly from cows in the springtime that are grazing on that first green grass, like in March, that comes back, is so rich in so many nutrients, high in vitamin D, high in vitamin A, and it's high in something that Dr. Price called the X factor, which we now know is vitamin K2. So butter, raw butter, grass-fed butter, very rich in vitamin K2, and it's expensive to buy by the pound, but I will buy it in bulk and stick it in my freezer, and it's like medicine for me. So I will use a pat. I'll put it, on my cereal in the morning. I will put put it in chicken stock and stir it up that way. Ghee is another great one. So if people are unable to do the dairy, the casein molecule in butter, then you can clarify it, basically take the casein molecules out, and you have ghee, which is a very healing fat, and it actually cooks better than butter because the milk solids are gone. You can cook at higher temperatures with the ghee. Used in Ayurvedic medicine very, exclusively as a way to really heal the gut and stoke those digestive fires. So I love butter.
So Rebecca had a question about what if you're trying to stay away from dairy?
So if you're staying away from dairy because of the casein, then ghee is an absolutely great alternative. Otherwise, there are other fats absolutely that you can use. I am not a fan of the butter alternatives because those are made with those omega-6 oils, canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, whatever. It's not a real food. It is a manufactured food, right? But we've become so kind of brainwashed, I think, in this country, right? Like, okay, I can't do the dairy, so I need another kind of milk. Well, do you really need another kind of milk? Like if you're going to make your own nut milk or seed milk or something, that's fine. But if you go and you look at all of those milks in those aseptic packages, there's a lot of sugar in those.
Right.
And then what really are you getting in terms of nutrients from that? Not very much. So it's this mindset that we have that we need to have milk. If you don't do well with milk, you don't have to do milk, right? But other fats, coconut oil, I use coconut oil in certain dishes, like I'll do it in, like Thai dishes and Asian dishes and things like that. I don't tend to use a lot of coconut oil myself because I also like to go with what my heritage is, and that's not my heritage. Like I'm Italian, so I use tons of olive oil and butter, right? Because that's what my ancestors used. I grew up in in Sicily on an island. That's what we had available to us. Lots of seafood, lots of really good fats from seafood. But other animal fats, are very traditional. Lard, tallow, duck fat, chicken fat. Those are the fats that are rendered from those animals, and we can render them ourselves, or we can get them, from local farmers. And those are the fats that we really want to be cooking in because they're very stable at those higher temperatures. Like McDonald's used to fry their French fries in tallow. You're going to be heating that oil up to a really high temperature to fry something. You want a really stable oil. Canola oil, grapeseed oil, they don't cut it. Safflower oil, rice bran oil, you want a really good stable oil. So looking at those kind of fats. Olive oil, like I said, is really great. Avocado oil is okay to cook at, higher temperatures with avocado oil. I think the jury is out a little bit on grapeseed oil. It's probably a very refined oil. So the less refining, the better. Not a fan of the safflower and the sunflower oils either, because they're those, vegetable seed oils, and those plants are actually sprayed with glyphosate before they're harvested. So if you're not getting organic, you're going to be getting glyphosate in those oils.
So yesterday I went to Miller's and I spent over $300 there, and I forgot that you needed cash only or check.
Right.
And fortunately, I went with a friend of mine who came prepared with a lot of cash. But I bought, they had this large container of coconut oil with ghee.
Yeah.
So I decided to try, and of course I bought a huge thing of, I only use olive oil or avocado oil. So I bought that too, but just to, have it on hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. I've used that too. It's very rich. And better tasting. And, if you're cooking for a family and you're using coconut oil, like let's say kids don't like the flavor of coconut or whatever, you can also get a refined coconut oil. It's basically, that there's no odor or flavor of the coconut in there. So you can cook and you can make baked goods with it, and you won't have that overpowering coconut flavor in there.
Great.
Yeah. So what else did we talk about? And we talked about grains. And so, in Dr. Price's studies, people ate grains, but they didn't eat grains the way we're eating them today. We're not hybridizing our wheat plants and letting them grow for a nanosecond and then making bread, right? White bread with them, which is so denatured. Grains were always soaked or sprouted or fermented so that the enzyme inhibitors that are present in them would become deactivated. So all grains, this is my jar of white basmati rice, so not this, but all whole grains that actually still have the germ on them have what's called phytic acid in them, and it's a protector to the plant. And when we don't properly prepare our grains, when we consume that phytic acid on a continual basis, what we're doing is actually leaching minerals from our body. So we're pulling things out of our system like magnesium and zinc and calcium. And it was really interesting because there was a study done years ago with women who were macrobiotic, who were eating tons of brown rice and beans and stuff without soaking the brown rice. And you think you're eating so well, and these women ended up with osteoporosis. And so the understanding then became that they were getting so much phytic acid that they were pulling all those minerals out of their body, out of their bones. So, soaking the grains is really going to help stabilize that. How do you soak the grain? You take your grain, you pour it into a bowl, measure out a cup or however much you want to cook, fill it with some really good clean water, and add some kind of an acid to it. Whey, which is the runoff from yogurt. You could add a little bit of a sauerkraut juice, kombucha, lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, some sort of an acidic medium that will deactivate that phytic acid. You leave it on your counter for about 8 hours, and then you can cook it the next day or that evening or whatever. The longer it soaks, the funkier it gets, right? It's going to start to ferment a little bit. If you want to keep them in the water for a longer time, you can change the water out. You can soak it overnight for 8 hours, and then in the next morning, stick it in a mason jar with, like a screened lid on it, turn it upside down and just keep it wet, and you'll start to sprout your grains.
So I used to, when I used to eat rice a lot or quinoa, I would soak my grains for 3 days and they would start to sprout. It was pretty cool.
Yeah. So what you're doing there is you're lessening the carbohydrate content of it and you're increasing the protein content of it. You're bringing it back to its original state as, when it went into the ground to start to grow.
Okay. So question is, do you cook with olive and avocado oil? I think you just answered that as yes. And what's the best oil for roasting at high temperatures?
So any of those animal fats are great. We were saying at the meeting that if you've never had potatoes roasted in duck fat, like that is pretty spectacular. I'll use avocado oil. I do use olive oil a lot. I'll use olive oil to saute on my stove, and kind of the way that I get around that, what I do is I get all of my veggies prepared that are going to go into that pan. I turn my pan on medium, not very hot at all, but medium, and I bring it up to temperature slowly. I put the olive oil in the pan and I immediately throw my garlic in or my onion or whatever, right? So you're not allowing the olive oil to come up to a really high temperature, because when I would put the pan on the stove, put the olive oil in and turn it on, inevitably I'd be doing stuff, I'd turn back and that olive oil is smoking. And at that point you want to get rid of it because you've just denatured that oil and you've changed it into carcinogenic compounds. So there are a lot of purists out there who use olive oil only as a finishing oil on salads and stuff, but I cook with it. What else? So
we also talked about the other night with bacon, right? You cook the bacon, you save the fat. And I did that the other day. And I've done that before, but I don't know. I've saved it, but I haven't really used it. But I put it in one of those glass mason jars, right? And I labeled when I, got it. But also what I did was after I got done cooking the fat and draining most of it, I then cooked cauliflower. Yeah. So it was really nice. I mean, I cooked it for like a half hour on a fairly low temperature, and we're going to eat it tonight. I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, it's really like getting around that mindset of what we've been so programmed, right? Like, people will still be like, oh yeah, no, I remember when my grandmother used to make, pies with lard. Oh my God, I can't believe she did that, right? And it's like, well, yeah, your grandmother was pretty smart. And, cooking with lard actually makes the best pie crust. And what we talked about the other night too was that lard is the meat that's rendered from pigs, is that lard from pigs out on pasture is incredibly high in vitamin D. Really good source of vitamin D. So, if you eat pork products and, use some lard to bake and to cook and fry and all that kind of stuff.
So before you go into the next thing, what else do you feel are the best sources of vitamin D?
Pastured egg yolks, so eggs from pasture where the chickens are grazing on grass and bugs, and milk, like a good raw dairy, again, where the cows are grazing on that green grass, the butter, wild fish. Yeah, cool. So there are sources. I'm just going to show you minerals. So I think one of the problems right now is that, our diet over the last 50 years or so, our soils have become so depleted. So our foods are so depleted and we're really all lacking minerals, right? And, if we have not a ton of access to food or something, I want to make sure I have enough food in my house that's going to be providing me really good minerals. So sea vegetables are like the #1 source for getting really good minerals into the diet. not only are they a great source of iodine, which so many of us are missing because, we're eating or we're drinking, water that has fluoride in it. We're eating products, bread products that have bromine in it. So we're doing all of these things that actually block our iodine receptors to our thyroid, right? So we want to make sure that we're not drinking fluoridated water and we're not eating, standard wheat bread that has bromine in it. And also, being out in this wireless soup of EMFs really affects the thyroid as well. So we need minerals. And then for the iodine, we want to do what we can to protect our thyroid as well. So I have, this is Maine Coast Sea Vegetables. So this is a big bag of what's called kelp. So kelp is a very kind of hard sea vegetable. So if I were to soak this in water, it's not really going to break down. It's just going to become very pliable. So I'm not really going to be able to chew it and eat it, right? But I add it to beans when I'm cooking my beans because it helps break down the beans. I add it to chicken stocks. When I make my broth, I add a big piece of kelp to the broth. You can add it to a vegetable broth and add it to a miso broth, right? You can really do anything. You can add it to grains when you're cooking your rice or when you're cooking your quinoa. You can add it, right? So what we're doing is we're getting those minerals added into the broth. And then, we can eat them. So there's different varieties. This is a sea vegetable called aramay that I like. It's a very edible one. It cooks up really nicely. It needs to be soaked for a short period of time, but you can find recipes for it. It's very briny tasting, right? So like I love to cook it with onions and garlic and hot pepper. And then I add a boatload of herbs to it. Cilantro, mint, parsley, lemon juice, vinegar, really something to make it really kind of savory. And that's really fun. There's the nori, right? Nori snacks that we can get, and they make it so easy right now. This sea snack company, you can buy them in little containers where they're toasted and they're delicious, and you can just snack on those, right?
I crave those, by the way. They're so expensive, those little containers, but I could literally eat like 3 or 4 in a sitting. They're so, containers. They're like for me, that tells me that I need it. Like if I start to eat it, my body goes, party time, like it makes me feel like maybe I'm deficient in this.
Exactly. And I also love them because they're salty and they're oily. So it's like chips. You're eating chips or you're eating seaweed chips. And then Maine Coast Sea Vegetable puts out seasonings. So this is a kelp seasoning. So they've done all the work and they've broken down the kelp and made it into a sprinkle instead of using salt. And this has cayenne in it. But in one serving of this, you get 958% of your iodine into this. So not only do the sea vegetables contain iodine, but they contain all of the trace minerals, right, that our bodies need to make sure that we're absorbing everything. Yeah, does that make sense? The other thing too about the fat is that what Dr. Price found was that these traditional cultures had much higher intake of vitamin A and vitamin D, which are vitamins for our immune system, really, right? Like look at all the talk right now with COVID and are you getting D and vitamin A for viruses and all of that. So they're fat soluble vitamins. So we need fat in our diet to be able to absorb all of those, right? So it's just something to think about in terms of the fat.
Great.
Other things that I love to keep on hand are herbs. Just having lots of herbs in my closet because they're great for cooking, but then you can also use them so medicinally, like any culinary herb that we use, basil, oregano, sage, rosemary, thyme. are so medicinal. So many of them have antiviral, antibacterial properties. They, a lot of them help the respiratory system, right? So we're in fall, coming into winter right now, COVID or no COVID, doesn't matter. This is a time where our respiratory system really needs a little bit of extra help. So cooking with them, making teas with them, and if you're feeling really congested or something, you can make a steam, make a really strong tea, and just stick your head in the steam and breathe all of that in. So a really nice way. And so this is a big bag of thyme that came from Mountain Rose Herbs, right? So you can get these things and buy them in bulk. And then you just have them, right? They're not going to go bad per se. They might lose their potency after about a year or something, but they don't really go bad. I also love keeping things on hand like astragalus. So astragalus is known a lot as like a Chinese herb, but it's an immune booster. So it looks like these little baby tongue depressors. So it's very woody. It's a root. You can also buy it kind of shaved or as a powder, but I will stick these in my broth as well and cook that up. So, like there's research out there about astragalus that it works really well to boost the immune system before you get sick. If you are sick, like if you do come down with something, I think the recommendation is that you want to stop the astragalus. So, you can use it periodically in tea, in your soups or whatever. If you are to come down with something, then you wouldn't be using it anymore. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So astragalus, and this I get at our local Amish called King's Herb Nook. So they grow and prepare all of these herbs, everything, organically. I keep turmeric on hand. I keep ginger on hand. These are both powdered.
Burdock. You also talked about burdock the other day.
You did. Yeah, I love burdock. So I didn't pull that one out. So right now, people are digging up burdock roots. So if you've ever, walked through the fields and you get all those burrs on you, right? Those are burdock plants. The taproot is very, very nourishing. So you get a root that's, probably like this long or this long, varied thicknesses, dark brown, earthy. But burdock is one of those foods that is very blood cleansing, very strengthening. And if you think about how it grows down deep in the ground, and you think about our bodies and kind of this, what's called doctrine of signatures, right? That, the foods that look a certain way or grow a certain way actually work on different parts of our body. So if you think of roots that grow down deep into the ground, what those roots do is actually provide us a lot of strength and a lot of stability, and also goes down and works on our root, which is our digestive system, right? Our gut health. Very amazing for cleaning the liver as well. So really liver supportive. And I just love burdock. It's really earthy. You saute it, I saute it, I don't peel it. I wash it. I don't scrub it too hard because I want that skin on there. Saute it with onion and carrot. There's a Japanese dish called kimpira that is very traditionally used as a strengthening dish for people. And then you can get it dried, tinctures, use it in teas, all those kinds of things. Yeah, thank you. Burdock is amazing. And so I have it dried and I'll use it in a tea, and burdock is something else that I'll throw into stock.
Yeah, so I know you have this beautiful herb garden, and obviously you have the dried ones, the dried herbs for the winter, but what herbs can you grow inside?
I think if you have good light, like on a windowsill, you can do basil plants, you can do little parsley plants, cilantro. Rosemary, people bring a lot of their rosemary plants in for the winter because it's not very hardy outside in this cold. So I think if you have enough light, I think you can, store things in your house over the winter too.
It's funny, with all the heat of the summer, I didn't get a chance to water my herb plants for a few days. And I think it was when we went away, we were gone for like a week, and I came back and they were pretty much dead. And I just cut the bottoms, right? I cut the plants off from the bottom. I got rid of it, and they've all regrown. Like, it's crazy. The
Mhm.
parsley's back, the basil, cilantro, it all just all grew back. And that was, not that long ago that I had, that I had thrown them away. And I guess I figure with the colder temperatures, and it's interesting because last winter, even with all the snow, a lot of the herbs didn't die.
Yeah.
So I found that to be pretty amazing.
We found that too. And we're
Yeah.
actually playing with wood chips to really put a lot of wood chips, a thick layer of wood chips over the beds that won't get, I mean, we don't till them in or anything, but to, excuse me, to keep the roots warm over the winter and then see what happens.
Yeah. So Rebecca wants to know, what is a good brand / source of olive oil?
There are a couple of articles on olive oil. So the thing about olive oil that's tricky is a lot of companies are cutting olive oil with canola oil and calling it olive oil. So there was a big expose on it, and I forget what it was called. So I can find that article, but I tend to get organic olive oil. I don't remember what brand it is. Looks like a big wine bottle. There's also an Italian market by me, and so I'll go to the Italian market, and the people who run the market know where that olive oil comes from. And so they're like, it doesn't say organic, but I know this family, it's not sprayed, it's not, it's 100% their olive oil, because the other tricky thing is that when they jar olive oil, what they do is they have a kind of like a holding plant, so they'll get olive oil from this farm in Greece, they'll get olive oil from Spain, they'll get olive oil from Italy, they'll get olive oil from France, and it all goes into this vat. And then that all gets jarred and gets put in a bottle that goes onto your supermarket shelf. So if you look, it'll say product of Spain, product of Spain, Greece, and Italy. You're like, oh, and the other thing is that meat processors do that as well, even organic meats. I remember years ago, I went to Wegmans and bought some organic meat because I just needed something quick, and it was ground meat. And I cooked it up and I'm eating it, and I was like, oh, it did not taste good to me at all. And I looked at the bag to make sure that it was organic, and it said, when they did have the country of origin labeling still out there, product of Brazil, Chile, like 3 or 4 different countries. And I thought, oh my God, that's so disgusting. That you take all this ground meat and you just, right? So know your farmer, right? This is also where we're going right now, that if, gas shortage, like whatever the scenario is, not to put fear into anybody, but let's be prepared if something's going to happen. We need to become hyper local consumers. Know who your local farmers are, know where you can get those chicken eggs, know where you can get that chicken, know where you can get that beef, because they're not going to run out.
So there were a couple other spices and herbs you talked about the other night, including holy basil, stinging nettle. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did talk about was that stress, right? We were talking about we're always bombarded with stress, and stress just, kind of ruins our nervous system, right? And so right now, if we're thinking about all this stuff, we're just constantly bombarded with all of this stuff. So really important to keep our nervous systems in check and running calm. So you could be eating the best food, and if your nervous system is all haywire, you're not digesting any of that. You're not absorbing any of that in. So how do we keep our nervous system functioning really smoothly? And we can do that really nicely through, teas. So Tulsi or holy basil is what's called an adaptogenic herb. So it helps our body deal with the stress. I prefer to buy herbs in their whole form, as a dried herb rather than the tea bags. because what you get in the tea bag is such an infinitesimal amount of that product, right? But you can go home and you can just throw a bunch of tea in, loose tea leaves, and make a really nice, nourishing tea. There are herbs out there that are called nervines, so really smooth the nervous system out. So oat straw, valerian, milky oats. Milky oats are the raw version of kind of like the oat plant. So when the oats are growing, when they're ready for harvest, the oat tops are harvested right off the bat, and then it's made directly into tea. It's frozen or whatever. So they're always used fresh. Otherwise, oat straw and things like that, you can buy dried. Lemon balm is really great for the nervous system as well, used in clinical studies for people with depression, helping with depression. So it really is like sunny and lemony and really wonderful. And then stinging nettle is one of my favorite herbs that's out there because it's such a mineral rich herb. It has so many minerals in it. It's rich in protein. It works on the whole body system. It's antihistamine. So if you have histamine issues, it helps regulate the histamine in your body. Works on the kidney, works on the liver, works on the adrenals, right? So, having some stinging nettles that are dried in your house is really great. I know Rebecca uses them in Tulsi a lot too, but it's very earthy. But when you drink it, it's almost like this shot of like green, like you feel so energized. You know that it's doing something really good for your body. So I think that's a really great way to get minerals into you is by using teas, and especially the nettles as well.
So it's getting late, so I want to ask you one more question before we go, and that is, can you give us like 3 books that you would feel are essential to learning either how to prepare foods or, what are nourishing, how to make ferments? I'm sure you have more than 3 that you'd like to mention, but
Yeah. So my favorite go-to book is Sally Fallon's book called Nourishing Traditions. And it's the cookbook that challenges politically correct nutrition and the diet dictocrats. So she really doesn't hold back on here. So this is the explanation of, how we've been hoodwinked all of these years about nutrition and food, and even supplementation. And so it's, 600 pages or more, full of recipes. So you have your fermentation in here. She shows you how to make bone broth, cooking with like really nutrient dense organ meats, which is something that, all of the traditional cultures did as well. But what I love about this book is that you open it up and there's all these sidebars, which are just interesting commentary about food and different cultures, but also, like how we use food in this country. And it would be like my bedtime reading when I first got this book. I just found it so fascinating. So there's Nourishing Traditions. In terms of preparing, I don't know, there's a couple of go-to books that I'm using right now. I think a book on herbs is amazing, like getting a really good book on herbs. And I have a bunch of those. Rosemary Gladstar is an herbalist, and she writes about, using herbs. Who else? There's a bunch out there. Robin Rose Bennett has a book that I've been using a lot on the healing gift of herbs. It just goes into, all of these herbs and different ways to use them for respiratory, for digestive, for skin, for nervous system, and has some beautiful recipes in there. Has a really nice section in there on using herbs in your kitchen and how to make kitchen remedies, like things with apple cider vinegar, putting herbs in honey, all of that kind of stuff.
I just thought of another question I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
You talked about the Byler broth.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what it is and what it's good for? Because my friend Marianne, who came to the meeting the other night, she went home and made it. She said she got the best night's sleep she'd had in a very long time.
Yeah. So the Byler broth is kind of a very specific recipe that was brought about by Dr. Byler. I don't know where or when, but he would work with patients convalescing, after illness or surgery or something. And he put together this soup that is made of zucchini, green zucchini, celery, green beans, and parsley. And those four things get cooked in water until they get nice and soft, and then you blend it. And so the combination of those vegetables have the appropriate combination to restore our sodium potassium balance in our body. So basically working on the adrenals. So again, calming down the nervous system. So, when you're feeling like, right, having that green drink is really nice because it just calms everything down. Is it the most tasty? Not really, but like I'll add a pinch of salt and some lemon juice and a pat of the raw butter and kind of drink it down as a soup. I put it in a mug and I drink it as a tea. I make it for my parents who are in their 80s and, I'm like, here, just drink this, right? Just as a really restorative soup. Works really well for people who are convalescing after an illness. The fourth ingredient was parsley. So zucchini, celery, green beans, and parsley.
Great.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you. Of course, I always love talking to you. I always learn so much, and I really appreciate you, and I'm grateful to you. How can people reach you if they want to learn more about you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, if people want to get in touch with me, I can put my website in the chat here.
Well, not everybody's going to see the chat. They're not going to see that on the replay.
Is my website. So Cucina Verde is my business, which just means green kitchen, basically in Italian. So we focus on a lot of, teaching people how to be green in their kitchen, prepare food, connect back to food. So that's www.cucina-verde.com. And then there's contact information on the website if people want to reach me there.
And I also want to mention that you do make your own line of fermented vegetables, which you can find in local grocery stores. And I would suggest that if they're not carrying it in your store, to ask them to carry it.
Yeah, it's fun to make the crowds, and then I would invite folks who are local who want to come out to a chapter meeting for the Western Price Foundation. We meet once a month, typically on a Thursday evening. It's not a very consistent monthly meeting just because of the place where we're meeting, the farm, right? So the farmers are busy doing a bunch of things. So people can get in touch with me that way, and I'm happy to put you on the mailing list because that's where a lot of this information gets shared, and it's an amazing group of really brilliant people who have a lot of information to share. So it's a really great place to come together and just be in a room full of incredible knowledge.
And I also want to mention there are going to be people maybe in Oregon or Washington State that are listening to this. So go to your Weston A. Price, go to the website. Weston A. Price Foundation, you could probably find a local chapter there as well. And, it's so important now more than ever to connect with other people, have that sense of community, feel the support. There's a lot of people that are feeling isolated. You probably have people very close to you that you don't realize that are there. And westonaprice.org is a good place to start. I love coming to the meetings. I love seeing everybody. I love hugging everybody. It's just such a warm and energizing and loving space. And I'm sure it's like that in other chapters too.
And we do a potluck and the food is amazing. But yeah, if you go onto their website, there's a section to find a local chapter. So, some chapters don't hold meetings. So the chapter leaders really are a resource for finding food in your area. So reach out to your chapter leader and say, who are my local farms? Where can I get pastured dairy? Where can I get pastured meats? Where do I shop? So you can really start to find where are those local hubs around you and start building community that way.
Yeah, and please support your local farmer. It's going to cost you a little bit more money, but in the end, it'll probably cost you less money because you'll be healthier than if you're buying what they're selling in the supermarket. So, get to know your local farmer. I love coming out to the farm every month. It's so peaceful and relaxing. And I just took a drive out there yesterday just because it was a gorgeous day. It's an hour drive for me to go out to Lancaster, but it was definitely worth it. So anyway, thank you again, Annmarie, and thank you for everybody who joined us. And we will see some of you soon.
Thanks again.